The Indiana Fever didn't just lose Game 5, they had it stolen. 26 seconds left in a tied game. Aaliyah Boston fighting for a rebound. Whistle blows. 6th foul. She's out. The All-Star center who'd been battling all night, carrying her team through injuries and adversity, ejected for what looked like standard basketball contact. The Fever challenged the call, desperate for someone with working eyes to overturn it. No luck. Jackie Young sank the free throws. Vegas took the lead, and Indiana had to finish without their anchor. But that wasn't even the worst part of this mess. Kelsey Mitchell never made it to those final moments. She collapsed in the third quarter, her legs going completely numb, her muscles literally shutting down from overexertion. Rhabdomyolysis, a condition where your muscles break down so severely they release toxins into your bloodstream. She laid on that court unable to move her lower body for up to 7 seconds, thinking the absolute worst. Hospitalized, treated with intravenous fluids, released late that night. And through all of it, one question kept echoing louder than the Vegas crowd. How did the officiating in this series get so impossibly bad? With regulation winding down and the score knotted at 84, Boston went up for a rebound against Young. Two players doing what they do every possession, fighting for position, battling for the ball. Standard basketball contact, the kind of play that happens dozens of times each game without a whistle. Except this time, with the season on the line and the Fever one stop away from overtime with their full roster intact, the ref decided this particular moment deserved a foul call. Boston's 6th. She was done. The Fever immediately challenged, knowing what everyone watching could see. This wasn't a foul by any reasonable definition. The officials reviewed it, watched the replay, saw the same contact everyone else did. And somehow, impossibly, the call stood. Young stepped to the line and buried both free throws. Vegas went up 2. Indiana's defense had just been gutted at the worst possible moment. Watch the replay yourself. Boston's positioning was legal. Her hands were vertical. Young initiated most of the contact. It was the kind of call that makes fans question whether refs understand the game they're supposedly controlling. And in a series where officiating had already become the biggest storyline, this was the moment that confirmed every suspicion about how this was going to end. The Fever still managed to tie it back up and force overtime. That's how resilient this group was. Down their leading scorer after Mitchell's collapse. Down their defensive anchor after Boston's phantom 6th foul. And they still refused to quit. But you can only fight so many battles at once. The Aces exploded for 21 points in the extra period. Final score, 107-98. Season over. And the bitter taste of what might have been if the whistle had just been fair. Mitchell's injury wasn't your typical basketball mishap. This wasn't a rolled ankle or a hyperextended knee. This was her body reaching its absolute limit and completely shutting down. One possession, she's draining a three-pointer, looking completely fine. The next, after using a screen from Boston, she suddenly crumples to the floor as soon as the whistle blows. She grabbed onto an official's arm to break her fall, and within seconds, the entire arena knew something was seriously wrong. Both teams surrounded her with towels to give privacy while trainers worked. The broadcast kept repeating that she was experiencing cramping, but this clearly wasn't ordinary cramping. Mitchell couldn't put weight on her left leg as they helped her off the court. A stretcher was rolled out, though she managed to avoid needing it. She was ruled out minutes later and transported to a local hospital. The diagnosis came the next day when Mitchell posted to social media, rhabdomyolysis. Her muscles had reached maximum capacity and simply stopped producing. The breakdown released proteins into her bloodstream that could damage her kidneys if left untreated. She experienced complete numbness and a paralyzing sensation in her lower extremities. No movement for 5 to 7 seconds. She panicked, thinking the worst-case scenarios you'd imagine in that situation. "I played literally till my wheels fell off," she wrote. That's not athlete hyperbole. That's a literal description of what happened to her body. She gave everything she had until her muscles physically couldn't function anymore. And she'd been doing it all season long, stepping into a leadership role after Caitlin Clark and 5 other players went down with season-ending injuries. 20 points per game in the regular season, over 22 per game in the playoffs. She carried this team further than anyone expected, and it cost her everything she had left. The Fever medical staff, Vegas medical staff, and hospital personnel got her stabilized. She was walking slowly by the next afternoon and expected to make a full recovery. But the fact that it got to that point tells you everything about what this team endured just to compete. Game 4 set the tone for how bizarre this series had become from an officiating standpoint. The Fever went to the free throw line 34 times. The Aces, 11. Boston alone shot 13 free throws, nearly double what the entire Vegas team attempted. The discrepancy was so glaring that even the Aces couldn't hide their frustration afterward. Aja Wilson called the free throw numbers very interesting, pointing out that 3 of her teammates finished with 5 fouls each. Becky Hammon was more direct. When Wilson used the word interesting to describe the officiating, Hammon cut in, by interesting, you mean that's shitty. The league fined her for that comment, but she wasn't wrong. The numbers were absurd. Here's what made it even more suspicious. Game 5, when the series was on the line and the Aces needed to close it out, suddenly the whistle flipped. All those touch fouls that Boston got in Game 4, gone. All that physical defense that Vegas got away with throughout the series, amplified. Indiana played the exact same style, attacked the rim with the same aggression, and got a completely different whistle. The pattern wasn't subtle. Every time the Fever built momentum, a questionable call would shift possession back to Vegas. Boston picked up cheap fouls that kept her in foul trouble the entire game. Mitchell got mauled on drives with no whistles. Lexie Hull took a shove from Jewel Lloyd that looked like it should have been reviewed for a flagrant no review. Natasha Howard got smacked across the eyes. Silence from the officials. Odyssey Sims absorbed contact all night and somehow ended up being treated like she was the one initiating everything. The officiating throughout the playoffs had been terrible league-wide, but this series felt different. It felt targeted. It felt like the league had decided Vegas was going back to the finals regardless of what happened on the court, and the whistle was going to make sure of it. Stephanie White didn't hold back after Game 4 when asked about the officiating controversy surrounding the league. She publicly supported Cheryl Reeve, the Minnesota coach who'd been ejected and suspended for confronting officials after a no call led to an injury to Nafisa Collier. White made it clear she understood Reeve's frustration completely. I think she made a lot of valid points, White said. A lot of the same conversations are happening from every team, from every franchise, from every coach, from every player. At some point, there has to be some accountability. Those weren't careful political words designed to avoid trouble. That was a coach who'd watched enough bad officiating to risk getting fined just to say something publicly. And she did get fined multiple times this season for criticizing refs. Sophie Cunningham got fined repeatedly for her comments. Caitlin Clark got fined for an Instagram comment about officiating. Angel Reese, Natasha Cloud, Kelsey Plum. The list of frustrated players willing to pay money just to speak truth kept growing. When that many people across that many teams are willing to accept financial penalties to call out the same problem, maybe the problem isn't the players. Hammon warned that the physicality being allowed was out of control and would lead to fights if the same contact level happened in the NBA. She wasn't exaggerating. The inconsistency was maddening. A moving screen that barely grazes someone gets called on one end. A full-body check on the other end gets ignored. How are players supposed to adjust their game when they have no idea what's legal from possession to possession? Lexie Hull spoke about it after Game 5 with the perspective of someone who'd lived through the chaos. That's what Steph said in the huddle, Hull explained. We're built for this moment. When Kelsey went down, and then when we were challenging the call on Aaliyah, we've been here before. It's just so unlucky, so crazy that had to happen tonight. Built for this moment. That phrase captures everything about how this Fever team approached adversity all season. They dealt with injuries, bad calls, and every obstacle the league could throw at them. They developed an identity around resilience because they had no other choice. And even when the officiating robbed them of a fair chance to advance, they still pushed Vegas to overtime. Odyssey Sims wasn't even supposed to be on this roster. She was signed late on a hardship contract after the injuries piled up. A veteran guard brought in to fill minutes while the Fever tried to survive. And in Game 5, with Mitchell gone and Boston fouled out, she became the heartbeat that kept Indiana alive. 27 points, 6 assists, 50% shooting. She blew past defenders who couldn't stay in front of her and finished through contact that officials never rewarded with whistles. Her layup late in regulation tied the game and sent everyone into overtime with the genuine belief that maybe, just maybe, the Fever could pull this off despite everything working against them. Boston delivered before her controversial exit. 11 points and 16 rebounds, constantly battling Wilson and Young for position in the paint. Even in limited minutes because of foul trouble, she demanded the ball and made Vegas pay when she got it. Her presence anchored both ends of the floor until the refs decided she'd been effective for long enough. Hull played through a back injury that would have kept most players on the bench. 12 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists. Her defense was everywhere, flying into passing lanes, diving after deflections, cutting off drives. After the game, she stepped forward as one of the strongest voices demanding accountability from the league. Her actions on court and her willingness to speak truth afterward showed exactly why Fever fans are rallying behind her for years to come. Shea Petty hit 3 crucial threes after Mitchell went down, stretching the floor and forcing Vegas to defend honestly. Without those shots, the Aces would have buried Indiana under another whistle-driven run. Every Fever starter finished in double figures. That's how complete the effort was. That's how desperately this team wanted to advance. And it still wasn't enough to overcome officiating that seemed determined to send Vegas through. The Aces had Wilson and Young both drop 30-plus points. The first time in WNBA playoff history 2 teammates hit that mark in the same game. That's exceptional basketball. But it shouldn't have taken that level of performance plus questionable officiating to beat a team missing 2 All-Stars and playing on fumes. The Fever walked out of Las Vegas with their season over, but their identity cemented. They proved they're not a fluke or a feel-good story. They're a legitimate threat that's only getting more dangerous. A 6th seed that nobody expected to be relevant just pushed the 2-time defending champions to overtime in a deciding game while dealing with absurd adversity. Clark will be back fully healthy next season. Her ability to stretch defenses, create for others, and score from anywhere transforms the entire offense. Boston has proven she can deliver double-doubles while dealing with foul trouble and double teams. When you add Mitchell healthy and ready to resume her role as a dynamic scorer, plus Hull emerging as a defensive anchor and locker room leader, you start to realize this isn't just potential anymore. Sophie Cunningham coming off the bench provides toughness and shooting. The culture this group built through surviving together creates a foundation that most teams spend years trying to develop. The Fever didn't just make the playoffs. They won elimination games. They beat higher seeds. They went into Vegas against a fully loaded championship roster and refused to back down until the final buzzer. This playoff run wasn't the culmination. It was the preview. The championship window isn't opening down the line. It's swinging open right now. And every team in the WNBA should be nervous about what comes next. Because if the Fever could do this much damage while shorthanded and fighting bad officiating, imagine what they'll do with a healthy roster and fair whistles. White addressed it directly after the game. This group is all heart. It's really hard to put into words. That heart doesn't disappear in the offseason. That resilience doesn't fade because one series ended. That identity of refusing to quit regardless of circumstances. That's what championship teams are built on. The Fever were robbed of a finals appearance. Let's not sugarcoat it. The officiating throughout this series was biased enough that multiple coaches risked fines to call it out publicly. The disparity in Game 4 was egregious. The timing of Boston's 6th foul was suspicious at best. The no calls on obvious fouls committed against Indiana players created a pattern too consistent to be coincidental. But here's what the refs couldn't steal. Proof that the Fever have officially arrived as a championship-caliber team. They showed resilience that will define them for years. They built chemistry through shared struggle that most rosters never achieve. They discovered leaders like Sims and Hull who stepped up when stars went down. They gave their fan base a season worth remembering even as it ended in heartbreak. Now it's on the fans to keep the pressure on the league. Don't let the officiating problems fade into off-season silence. Share what happened. Demand accountability. make enough noise that the WNBA can't ignore the systematic failures that plagued these playoffs. These players fought too hard, sacrificed too much, and overcame too many obstacles to have it all undermined by whistles that felt predetermined. The 2026 season starts with the Fever as one of the most dangerous teams in the league. Clark returns, Mitchell returns, Boston enters her prime, Hull continues developing, and the entire roster comes back hungry, motivated by what was taken from them. That's the storyline worth following. That's the team worth supporting. And when they finally break through and win it all, remember that it started with a Game 5 where they proved they belong, regardless of what the scoreboard said.